My name is Catherine Miller. I am 62 years old and have been a nun for almost 4 decades. I live at St. Mary's Convent in Charleston, South Carolina. Here, among the silent walls and the colored stained glass windows, I found my purpose, to serve God and care for the souls that He puts in my path. But that day, it was my soul that needed to be taken care of. It was an ordinary Tuesday. The sky was clear, and the aroma of coffee mixed with incense created that subtle perfume of sacred routine. I began the day with prayer, as always. In silence, I knelt before the altar, feeling a peace that can only be found in those moments of complete surrender. But something, I don't understand, was worrying me. It wasn't fear. It was a strange feeling, like something was about to happen. During Mass, with the pews already filled with worshippers, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. I took a deep breath, trying to hide it. Maybe it's just fatigue, I thought. But the pain returned, stronger. Within seconds, the world began to darken. The voices around me grew distant, as if I were diving into a deep lake. I tried to hold on to the seat in front of me. Someone called my name. Twice. 3 times. And then, silence. Absolute. I was declared dead at 09:46 a.m. Right there, before the altar where I had so often delivered prayers on behalf of others, was where my own life slipped away. But this story doesn't end there. In fact, she's just getting started. And if you've come this far with me, it's because maybe this story is also speaking to you. Before we move on to what happened on the other side, and it was real as this moment right now, I want to ask you something with all my heart. Like this video and subscribe to the channel. This really helps to get this message out to more people. And believe me, someone needs to hear it today. All I remember was the feeling of falling, not down, but inward. Like I was being gently pulled into a place where time didn't exist. There was no pain, no fear, just a total absence of everything we know as life. And in that absolute silence, my heart stopped beating. The doctors later said I was pronounced dead at 9:46 in the morning. My heart had stopped. No electrical activity, no signals, nothing. But there, in that silent void, something was beating differently. It wasn't my body. It was my consciousness. I didn't see any light at first. I saw only white, a white that didn't shine. It just was. It was like being in a dense fog, but at the same time, light. I didn't walk. I didn't breathe. And yet, I knew. I existed. The strangeness of this perception is something impossible to describe in human words. You know you're there, but you don't feel a body, weight, or time. You just are. There, in that silence where not even thought had form, I began to hear something. It was the purest sound I had ever heard. It wasn't music, but it had harmony. They weren't words, but they communicated. And then I realized it was coming from inside me, or what was left of me. It was as if my soul was remembering who it was before the world. I felt a presence. I haven't seen it yet, but I felt it. Strong, welcoming, deep, like when someone hugs you without touching you. That silence began to break, little by little, like glass slowly cracking. The reality around me began to change. The white gained texture. It was as if I was inside a living cloud, pulsating with something bigger than anything. And then I heard my name, Catherine. It was not a voice as we know it. It was a direct call to the essence. It did not ring in the ears. It ringed in the soul. It was soft, but it had authority. It was tender, but it was firm. For the first time in that space, I felt something like human emotion. A shiver, not of fear, but of reverence. Catherine, you are not alone. At that moment, a figure began to appear in front of me, but I still couldn't see her. It was like looking at a light through water, distant, shimmering, but alive. The sound around me grew louder, and I felt like I was being led towards something, not with my feet, but as if a gentle force carried me along, like a breeze pushing the leaves effortlessly. That's when I saw it. In the distance, a silhouette. Small, but bright. A being of light, childlike in appearance, but with infinitely ancient eyes. It was a boy of light. He smiled at me, not with his mouth, but with his entire being. And when he smiled, all my doubts evaporated. That being knew everything about me. There was no judgment, only an acceptance so pure, it hurt. He extended his hand, and in that gesture I understood. Something much bigger was about to happen, and I still had no idea how much that would change my life, and maybe yours too. When that boy of light reached out his hand to me, I felt something I had never experienced in my entire earthly life. It wasn't fear, nor joy, nor peace. It was all of these things together, as if all the emotions had merged into one truth. I hesitated, not because of doubt, but because I knew, without knowing how, that when I touched that hand, nothing would ever be the same again. And I played. The moment our fingers touched, or rather, when our essences connected, everything around us transformed. The fog disappeared. The white, previously opaque, became alive. I was now in a space that seemed to have no floor, no ceiling, no walls. But at the same time, there was structure. It was like being inside something eternal. A white but conscious void. Not a nothing, but an everything. There was no time there. There was no past, no future. But I understood it everything, as if all the knowledge in the world was available, and at the same time, irrelevant. What mattered there was the truth. A truth that didn't need to be explained. It was felt. It was as if my soul was coming home, and every particle of me was saying, yes, it was here all along. The boy walked, or moved, as if floating, and I followed him. Not with my feet, because I no longer had feet, but I followed him, and with each step he took, the white void around him reacted. He was not walking in space. Space reacted to his presence, and even though he was small, there was something about him, greater than anything I had ever seen. He stopped. He looked at me deeply. His eyes weren't eyes. They were portals. It's impossible to explain with human logic. I saw images in them, from my childhood, from me as a little girl, kneeling in the field behind the church in my town. I saw my father holding my hand, my mother crying softly as I said goodbye to enter the convent. Every moment of my life passed through his eyes like reflections of a memory that wasn't just mine. It was his too. "Do you still remember who you are?" he asked. And for a second, I didn't know how to respond. Because there, I was no longer Sister Catherine. I was something much older, more pure, more true. It was as if my entire earthly identity had been just a garment, and now I was naked before what I truly am. A soul, an eternal spark, a fragment of what created me. I felt an intense emotion, almost unbearable, as if my heart, if I still had one, couldn't handle so much love, so much truth. I fell to my knees. Or maybe I just gave in, and he came closer once more. He touched my shoulder and said, "You haven't seen everything yet." And at that moment, the white around him trembled. Not in a physical sense, but like a vibration, as if the space itself was reacting to what was coming next. Behind him, the void began to part, like a curtain being torn apart. And I knew someone was on the other side. As the curtain of light opened before me, I felt a gentle weight in the air. It was as if something very ancient and sacred was about to reveal itself. The boy of light remained by my side, but his expression changed. There was still tenderness, but now there was also a seriousness that passed through me like a silent wave. The light on the other side was not blinding. It was alive. It beat as if it had a heart. And even without a defined shape, I felt it. Someone was there, not just watching me, but waiting for me. The boy looked at me and said, "You will see him now." And in that moment, time, even this strange time that wasn't made of seconds, seemed to stop. The space opened up in a golden glow, and the figure began to emerge. First a presence, then an outline. It was tall, but not imposing. strong but not threatening. With each step it took toward me, I felt my insides crumble, as if all the walls I had built in my life were being removed one by one, slowly, painlessly. He stopped in front of me, and in that moment, I knew. Before he even said a word, I knew. It was him, Jesus, but not as I imagined him in the stained glass windows of the chapel, or in the old paintings of the convent, not as the portraits with the white robe and the neatly shaped beard. He was more, much more. His light did not come from outside. It came from within. His eyes, oh, his eyes. They were the saddest and most loving eyes I had ever seen, as if they carried the weight of the world and yet forgave everything, without hesitation. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at me, and in that look, I saw my entire life, every mistake, every choice, every time I'd loved, and every time I'd failed. But there was no judgment. There was pain. Not for me, but for everything. For humanity. For the distance we put between ourselves and him, even though he'd never walked away. "Do you still remember how to love?" he asked. I didn't know what to say, because at that moment I realized even the love I thought I knew was small compared to the love he carried. A love that doesn't demand. A love that just is. Jesus came closer, and without touching me, he showed me visions. People in the real world. Abandoned children, families at war, people screaming inside without anyone hearing them. And along with these scenes, I felt their emotions. It was like living 1,000 lives in seconds. And he said to me, "They have forgotten what love is, and you need to remind them." There, I cried. I cried like I had never cried in my life, because I understood the magnitude of the mission. And even more, I understood how much we lose ourselves trying to find things that will never fill what can only be filled with true love. And this is where I stop to ask you, and it is from the bottom of my soul, that I do this. Do you believe that love can still heal the world? If this question touched you, write it in the comments. You don't need to write much. Just say yes, no, or why. It may seem small, but sometimes a single word touches deeper than 1,000 sermons. Jesus held my hand, but his touch wasn't physical. It was total. As he held my hand, he also held everything I had been, everything I am, and everything I don't yet understand about myself. I felt a gentle warmth, like a summer breeze passing through my soul. And when he looked at me, I saw that his eyes were no longer sad. They were filled with hope. "You need to see something," he said, his voice seeming to come from every direction. And then, without me taking a single step, the scenery around us began to change. The surrounding light slowly dissolved, as if it was being pulled to form a path, and before me, a golden trail appeared. Literally golden, not made of metallic gold, but of a living substance, which vibrated with every thought I had. With each breath, if I was still breathing there, the path seemed to expand further. Jesus walked beside me, and with him, everything was clear. There was no doubt, no fear, just a silent certainty that I was being led to a place that I never imagined existed. Along the way, I heard voices, soft voices, like distant chants. Some were crying, some were laughing, some were screaming in despair, but none of them sounded hollow. They all had souls. I asked him, "Who are they?" He calmly replied, "They are those who cry out for answers, those who pray in silence, those who suffer in silence. Every voice has a name, every name, a story, and every story matters." I kept walking. The path narrowed as we advanced, and ahead something began to appear. A door, but it was no ordinary door. She was made of pulsating light. I was breathing. It looked alive, and it emanated something that I can only describe as truth. Not a truth that imposes itself, but one that invites, that calls you without promising, that attracts you without forcing. I stopped in front of her. My knees buckled, not out of fear, but out of reverence. The energy there was so intense, so full of love and pain at the same time, that the only thing I could do was surrender. Jesus looked at me. This is where many stop, because what's behind that door changes everything. I asked with what little voice I had left. Am I ready? He smiled, a smile full of compassion. You're not ready, but you're willing, and that's enough. The boy of light appeared again, now next to the door. He held out his hand to me, as he had done before. Only this time his eyes were moist, and I understood without words that what I would see inside would not be easy. I felt, for the first time, what we might call hesitation. Not because I doubted, but because I sensed that crossing that door was touching something too sacred to be explained. It would be like seeing the heart of God, beating. The door opened, but it did not turn on its hinges, nor did it make a sound. She just fell apart, as if it had been done only on intention. And the instant it faded, I was filled with a light so intense that if I had still had physical eyes, I would have looked away. But there, on that other plane, I could face the impossible without fear. I took a step forward. The space that unfolded was vast, but it was not empty. There were no walls, no ceiling, no floor. There was consciousness. I was inside something alive, and at the center, him. Jesus was there, but different than before. Now it was not the silent master walking beside me. It was the king, not a king as humans imagine. There was no crown, no throne. There was only a majesty so profound, so absolute, that the entire universe seemed to bow before him. And yet he was humble, so humble that it made me cry, without understanding why. He looked at me, and in that look, my soul was torn apart. Jesus' eyes were not eyes. They were mirrors of everything we are, and everything we forget we should be. To look at him was to see my own heart naked, with all its wounds, doubts, omissions, and fears, but also with all the flashes of true love that I tried to carry throughout my life. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me, and I felt it. I felt his pain, an immense pain, a sadness that was not just mine, nor just the world's. It was his, because he carries each one of us within himself, and every child who suffers, every old man who dies alone, every abandoned woman, every man who loses himself in hate. He feels everything, always. I wanted to ask for forgiveness, for everything, for humanity, for myself, for the times I prayed without feeling, for the times I served without loving, for the times I judged when I should embrace. But he didn't let me say anything. He just placed his hand on my chest. And he said in the softest and most powerful voice I have ever heard, "You still feel, Catherine, and that is enough for me." It was at that moment that I understood that he does not demand perfection. He never did. He wants presence, truth, a heart willing to love, even if flawed. Because love, for him, is not about immaculate purity. It is about sincere surrender. I burst into tears, and for the first time I understood the true meaning of mercy. Then Jesus showed me something, a vision. But it wasn't from heaven, it was from earth. Crowds of people running, screaming, hurting each other. And at the same time, thousands of little lights. Ordinary people doing good in silence. Children holding trembling hands, people forgiving each other, people loving, in spite of everything. He looked at me once more and said, "They have forgotten who they are, but there is still hope." That's when I understood why he had brought me there, and why I couldn't stay. Not yet. The light around Jesus seemed to breathe, as if the universe itself was moving along with his presence. Still kneeling before him, I felt a mixture of awe and pain, because the closer I got to what he was, the more I realized how far we had come. He helped me up, no touch, just a gesture of intent, and looked inside me once more. "You need to see what's coming." It was then that the scenario changed. As if we were inside a lens that moved through time, images began to appear all around us, first slowly, then more intensely, It was like watching a succession of future events, but with a bare heart. I saw people with their eyes blank, running in crowds without direction. I saw cities silent, even with the cars moving. People were alive, but empty. And the most painful thing was to realize that this was not a physical catastrophe. It was spiritual. They had forgotten who they were. They had forgotten how to love. Jesus, with a firm voice, said, "They will plunge into confusion, not for lack of truths, but for an excess of versions." Those words were branded into me like a branding iron, because it wasn't evil that would destroy the world. It was the absence of meaning, the loss of genuine, simple, selfless love. And then he showed me what would happen if humanity continued to deny the sacredness that exists in every act of kindness. I have seen wars not started out of hate, but out of fear. I have seen relationships torn apart by pride. I have seen people destroying each other with words, and others simply giving up, without a fuss, without a warning. "But there is still time," he said, "and you still have a voice." My heart seemed to implode. I didn't want to leave. I had never wanted to stay in a place as much as I wanted to stay there, at his feet. But he looked at me like a father who knows that his son needs to leave in order to grow, with love, but also with urgency. "You will return, Catherine, and you will carry the memory of what you saw, even if they doubt, even if they mock, even if they remain silent. Speak." That's when I understood. This experience was not a gift. It was a calling, and the secret that would change everything was this: we are not waiting for a miracle. We are the forgotten miracle. The love that is missing in the world is trapped inside scared hearts. Tell them that I still hear them. Tell them that I never left anyone, that my silence was never absence. I burst into tears once more. "But I'm small," I tried to say. "I'm just an old woman, hidden away in a convent." And he, with that healing smile, replied, "It was with a breath that I created everything." He moved away a little, and in the background I saw the light starting to close. And then I heard the phrase that I carry to this day, like an invisible mark on my soul. "Tell them the time to remember is now. Please, let me stay." These were the words I said as I knelt before him, my soul in pieces and my heart overflowing. I didn't want to go back, not after feeling what I felt, not after touching that peace that no prayer on earth had ever made me reach. I knew that when I returned, everything would seem smaller, colder, more distant. Jesus listened to me in silence. I expected a gesture, a refusal, perhaps a simple no, but he just looked at me with that gaze that does not accuse, does not impose, a gaze that envelops you completely, as if every part of your being were before an eternal mirror. "You need to go back," he said gently. "They still listen to you." At that moment, everything inside me revolted. "But I'm nobody," I argued. "The world won't listen to me. I'm just an old nun, forgotten in South Carolina." Jesus approached and responded with something I will never forget. Even the smallest grain of sand changes the course of the wind. And then he showed me something that completely changed my perception. I saw people watching a video, my video, me speaking, still fragile, still trembling, but with truth in my eyes. And I saw the faces of those people changing. A suppressed cry, a sigh of relief, a new beginning, all because of simple words coming from the heart, words that I didn't even know I had. "You will be resistance in the midst of the noise," he said. "You don't need to convince. You need to remind. True love is remembered, not taught." I remained silent. He came closer and touched my forehead. And in that touch, I felt a discharge of energy so intense that I almost fell apart right there. It was as if he was filling me with the last part of the mission. A confirmation, a seal. I tried to plead one last time. "But I'm afraid." And he answered firm and tender, "That is why I will be with you." And then I was pulled, not violently, but urgently, as if time were screaming back at me, as if the earth were claiming me. I saw the light scene slowly fading away. The boy of light looked at me one last time and waved, and the final words I heard from him were, "Take what you saw and don't keep quiet." It was like falling, a dive in reverse, a disembodied descent. Silence gave way to sound, light to weight. The warmth of his presence was replaced by a deep cold, and then the pain returned. But that is what I'll tell you in the next chapter. What happens when the soul returns to a body that has already been declared dead? What happens when heaven sends you back with tears in your eyes? The return was like being torn from an eternal embrace. My body had already been declared dead. My heart had stopped for more than 20 minutes. But there, in the depths of a sacred silence, an order had been given. And when it came, everything changed. I felt a tug, not physical, but deep, as if an invisible anchor was pulling me back hard. A whirlwind of sounds, memories, and sensations invaded my consciousness. The light was disappearing, and in its place, a suffocating weight. It was like trying to fit into a shoe that was several sizes too small. I was returning to my body, and it was resisting. The pain was immediate, an explosion in my chest. My lungs, dry and cold, tried to draw air with an ancient desperation. My eyes burned like fire. My fingers closed instinctively. Reality came back like a scream. I heard voices, confused, scared. "She's coming back! Oh my God, she's breathing! Call the doctor back, quickly!" I opened my eyes for the first time, and for a moment, I regretted it, because the first sensation was of loss. The absence of his presence was like an inexplicable mourning. I cried, but not for his return. I cried for the instant longing for what I had left behind. The nuns around me were crying too. Some were kneeling. Others were just staring, uncomprehending. The paramedics were paralyzed. They had stopped their efforts minutes before. My time of life was officially over. But I was there, breathing, crying, and trying to articulate something. It was Sister Margaret who approached first. She took my hand, tears in her eyes. Did you see something?" I shook my head with difficulty, and I muttered the first thing I could say. "I saw Jesus." A heavy silence fell over everyone. My voice was weak, hoarse. My body was exhausted. But my soul was burning, as if I carried something inside me that was burning to get out. Something urgent, something that couldn't wait. I asked for a piece of paper, a pen, and with trembling hands I wrote, "I need to tell you what I saw." The doctors came running. They ran tests, shouted orders, couldn't believe what they were seeing. And somehow I knew that every second from then on was a mission. I had come back with a message. And even if the whole world called me crazy, even if they laughed at my story, I couldn't keep quiet. When I asked for a camera, no one understood. I could barely lift my head. I was weak, pale, my eyes still red from the tears that seemed to never stop. But there was something burning inside me, something I knew could not wait. It wasn't about me. It never was. It was about what I was shown, about the urgency, about his words that echoed through me like silent thunder. "You will be resistance in the midst of noise." A cell phone was placed in front of me. Sister Margaret held it with trembling hands, unsure of what to say or do. She just pressed the record button and looked at me. I took a deep breath. I closed my eyes for a moment, searching for the vivid memory of that look, the eyes of Jesus, and I started talking. "My name is Catherine Miller. I am a nun. I am 62 years old, and yesterday I died." My voice was still weak, but there was a firmness that even I didn't recognize. As he spoke, the room around him fell silent. The sisters who had previously cried now just listened. The doctors, nurses, everyone stopped, as if time, once again, had bowed to what was happening. I told him everything, about the light, about the boy, about the door, about his gaze. I told him about the words I heard, about the world I saw, about the pain that Jesus still carries for each one of us. I told him about the call, about the request. They have forgotten what love is, and you need to remind them. It wasn't a sermon, it was a cry. And as I spoke, I realized something even stranger. I felt no fear, no shame, no doubt. I knew that, just as he had promised me. I was not alone. The video lasted just over 11 minutes. As soon as it was finished, Sister Margaret sent it to a prayer group we had on WhatsApp. By late afternoon, he was already in dozens of groups across the state. The next day, it exploded. It was shared by priests, by the faithful, by atheists, by people who had never set foot in a church. Some said it was a miracle, others that it was an invention. But nobody remained indifferent. The congregation was divided. Some brothers hugged me, crying. Others looked at me with suspicion. I was called an instrument of God, and also delusional. But I knew what I saw. I knew who sent me. I was called to give interviews. I refused, because this wasn't about fame. It was about faith. I just asked that they let the video run its course. He said my mission was to plant the seed, not to control who would water it. And so it began. The testimony kept growing, but with it came pressure. I didn't imagine that the greatest resistance would come from within. After the video spread, messages started coming in from all corners. People who said they had started praying again after years. Children who called their parents they no longer spoke to. People who were about to give up and change their minds because of 11 minutes of truth. But the dirty looks also started to arrive. The whispered questions in the convent corridors. The silent invitations to review what I had said. The first week I was called in for a meeting with the head of the congregation. He looked at me with a serious expression, his hands folded on the dark wooden table. "Sister Catherine, what exactly do you intend to do with this video?" I took a deep breath. "To make people remember what Jesus said and what he still feels." He sighed, looking away. "Do you understand that this could be confusing? It could be seen as exaggerated mysticism, as a delusion." I looked into his eyes, and for the first time in my life I spoke without fear, before an ecclesiastical authority. The delusion is pretending that faith is only useful if it is comfortable. I saw what I saw, and I was sent. This is not about me. The meeting ended in silence. In the following days, I had some restrictions. They asked me to avoid giving interviews, even on Catholic channels. They said my health was still fragile. They said I should preserve my spirit. But I knew it was fear, the fear of the inexplicable, the fear that God still speaks, and not just through dogma and papers. They started treating me like a burden. Some sisters stopped talking to me. Others watched me as if I were a threat, a mistake, a dangerous crack in a system that valued order more than the living presence of Christ. I doubted, not him, but myself. So many times I have knelt in my room at night and asked, "Lord, did I understand correctly? Could it be that it was just a dream? Could it be that I wanted to stay so badly that I imagined it all?" And then, whenever these doubts consumed me, something happened. An anonymous letter left under my door, a handwritten note. "Your video saved me." I had already bought the pills. And there, I remembered, it's not about approval. It never was. It's about delivery. Jesus was never accepted by everyone. Why would I be? My body already knew, before me, before any doctor, any test. It knew there would be no second round. And that was okay. This past week, my heart felt at peace. My eyes, despite their fatigue, once again shone with the same light I saw in him. I knew my mission was accomplished. I had not shouted to the world, but I had whispered with faith, and the whisper of one who has seen heaven echoes louder than 1,000 speeches. The night before I left, I asked Sister Margaret to let me write alone. I sat at the small desk in my room. His hands were shaking, but steady enough to leave one last message. Not for me, not even for the church, but for all those who, even without knowing me, had been touched by that light. I wrote in silence. The paper was simple, folded in 3 parts. On the cover, I wrote simply, "If you are reading this, it is because there is still time." Inside, my words were few. He is still waiting for you. Love is not over. It is dormant. Inside each one of you. I signed Catherine Miller, imperfect servant, faithful witness. The next day at dawn, I was found sitting with my head resting on the windowsill, a slight smile, my hands resting on my lap, and peace. That same peace I felt when he first looked at me. The letter was read at the wake. It was recorded on video and published. She traveled the world. People from Japan to Mexico shared. Young people began praying silently on subways. Churches filled up, not out of fear, but out of hope. People started writing letters to each other again. Parents hugged their children. Couples forgave each other. Not for me, but because that letter said what we all need to hear at some point in our lives. There is still time. There is still love. There is still God. And if you've come this far with me, then you're also part of this story, because now you are the one who carries the message. Maybe you haven't had a near-death experience. Maybe you've never heard his voice. But maybe, just maybe, he's using this story to remind you of something you already knew, but had forgotten. Eternity begins the moment we choose to love. And if this touched you in any way, share it. Not for me, but for someone who is perhaps one step away from definitive silence and only needs a word, a memory, a look, or one last message. If you've come this far with me, then this story touched something deep inside you. And that's why I want to ask you, with all my affection, subscribe to the channel right now. It doesn't cost anything, and you'll receive other stories like this one that speak straight to the heart. Also, leave your like, not just for me, but because it helps this message reach someone who might need it right now. And if this story resonated with you, comment below. I still believe in love. It may seem simple, but a sentence has power. It can inspire, it can comfort, it can transform. And now, click on the next video that's appearing here on the screen. There's something there that you need to hear. Maybe it's an answer, maybe a sign, but only those who make it to the end understand what comes next. Because love doesn't end here. It continues, and it still waits for us.